Aloha! This CME activity is jointly provided by the Queens Medical Center and UH-JABSOM Department of Geriatric Medicine. We offer free continuing education for this series. In order to receive a CME or CEU, participants must complete the online evaluation at the end of the webinar. Your comments are very important to the planning committee and will be used to plan future programs. About ECHO. We want to remind everyone that this is an ECHO webinar, which means that this session serves as a forum for mutual teaching and learning from experts and from each of us on the front lines. As the ECHO motto goes, all teach, all learn. So it will take all of you to create this community of learning. In the spirit of Aloha, we encourage you to turn on your cameras to help us build a community of learning. Feel free to eat during this ECHO session. Good nutrition is a key to healthy lifestyle. A little bit about our format. After a short lecture from our experts, we will share expertise from the rest of the team, and then open up the time for case discussions. We invite you to share any geriatric cases. It may even be on a topic not related to the topic of today's lecture. We only ask that you keep it HIPAA compliant case for discussion. That means please do not share patient's name, birthday, address, and so on. We learn best from our patients. They are the best teachers. Our interdisciplinary team is here as well, and we are all willing to teach and share our collective wisdom with you. Most of you already know me. I am Wynette Gaylord, President of the Alliance of Residential Care Administrators, ARCA. We have Maribel Tan, President of Foster Family Homes Association, Elsa Talavera, President and CEO of All Island Case Management Corporation, Brittany Pacheco, Health Coordination Manager for Big Island and Kauai, and LTSS Coordinator from Aloha Care, Leila Ventar, Health Coordination Manager from United Healthcare, Kauai County, and Dr. Rita Bell Fernandez from University of Hawaii. We are in our fourth and final month of our mentation series. If you're interested in viewing any of those lectures and handouts, you can find them on our website. Unfortunately, we cannot offer certificates of attendance for videos you have viewed. You must participate in our education live. The title of today's webinar is Deciding for One Who Cannot. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Gary A. Powell. Gary is an island boy born in the plantation town of Wailua and raised on Oahu's North Shore. He is the executive director of the Caregiver Foundation, where he and his dedicated team provide practical and emotional support to kupuna and disabled adults. Gary holds the distinguished designation of National Certified Guardian and has extensive experience teaching courses on guardianship, conservatorship, mediation, as well as insurance and investment topics. He is a highly sought after speaker, delivering engaging presentations on a variety of subjects, including bioethical decision-making and managing mom's money to audiences in Hawaii, Japan, and across the United States. In addition to his speaking engagements, Gary is the author of In That Land There Are Giants and has provided expert advice to the state of Hawaii, the city and county of Honolulu, and private facilities on program development and physical design. Let's now welcome Mr. Gary Powell. Aloha!
Thanks very much for having me. Let's see if I can share my screen successfully. Let me know if that comes through okay. So is everybody able to see that?
Looking good, Gary.
Okay, great. Well, I'm really glad to be able to be here with you folks and give you some background on the Caregiver Foundation. It's an organization that works with seniors and adults with disabilities and their caregivers in everything from managing their money to managing any aspect of care that they might need, from placement to medical care, all the way through death, burial, and estate distribution. So it's kind of every every bit of life. But one of the things that we find most often is that we're faced with situations where we need to make decisions for somebody who didn't prepare. Maybe they didn't have a pulse prepared. Maybe there's no health advanced care directive. Maybe there's not a power of attorney in place. And maybe there are no relatives or trusted individuals that they have put in place to make those decisions for them. And that's where we end up with a lot of difficulty, both in care home settings, in hospitals, in private facilities, because making a decision for somebody has a lot of implications to it. People become unable to make decisions for themselves for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's very temporary. They're unconscious. They have an illness that's made it so that they can't communicate well. More often, we find individuals with dementia and mental illness are not able to make decisions for themselves, or perhaps I should clarify, they're not able to make all decisions for themselves. Someone who is declared incapacitated doesn't necessarily have the inability to not make every decision, but there may be certain areas of decisions that they're not capable of handling. Frequently, that involves finance, but more and more we're discovering that it covers the healthcare side of things, where people just have lost the ability to comprehend what's going on with their health and don't have the ability to tell you or anyone else what it is they want. So this can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. It can happen to me. In fact, if I've been put to sleep for surgery for some reason, I've lost the capacity to make a decision for myself. The hospital needs to make sure that they have the paperwork or they have the individual in place who can make those decisions for me should that need arise. So it doesn't mean just old people who have dementia lose the ability to make decisions. It can be anyone. There are three basic things that all of us need, especially when we're working with individuals whose capacity may be in question. When you're faced with a situation where you need to make a decision, perhaps it's someone who doesn't have a family member and they're in your care home or in your facility, and something happens, you need to call ER, they need to go to the emergency room, and they need some kind of treatment, and somebody needs to sign an authorization. Who's that going to be? First thing you have to think of is, if you're planning to sign with that authority, what gives you the right? Do you have the legal right to sign for someone's healthcare decision? Really have to be careful there. So let me tell you about a case we've had recently. A lady showed up in the emergency room, and she wasn't our client. The hospital works with us quite a bit, and they called and said, we need some help. This lady needs surgery right away, and we don't have any paperwork telling us who is involved in her family. We need a temporary guardian. Would you do that? Well, we do serve as guardian for a lot of people. We serve as conservator and trustee also. But guardianship isn't something you can get that quickly. It's almost impossible to get guardianship in less than 90 days. So in 90 days, if you need immediate surgery, that's going to be a big problem. We talked about it for a while, and we were able to get them to agree to have their ethics committee work on that particular issue to get emergency treatment pushed through under the hospital's ethics standards. But you'll find, as a caregiver, as a facility manager or care home operator, you'll find often the hospitals don't want that position. They don't want to make that decision. They want somebody else to be there to make that decision. Why? They don't want to get sued. Maybe they don't know who this person is. They don't know what that person wants. They don't know what family's involved or who's involved. And if they make a decision, they're worried about somebody coming back at them saying, that's not the right decision. Why did you do that? and they're having to then defend themselves. You could fall into the same situation. So always ask yourself, what right do I have to make a decision for this person? Step two is when you're thinking that, you need to think, who else is involved in this? Is it a doctor? Is there a family member that you have on record somewhere? Can you reach them? Is it someone that knows this person real well? You may be faced with a situation where the hospital and you need to do what's called a consensus authorization, where everybody you can think of that might be involved with this case gets together and comes up with a decision collectively. The state recognizes that. There's no liability when that happens. But think, who else is involved? And try not to make the decision just yourself. And of course, if there are written instructions, that's where you really want to make sure that you have the documentation. We have a process here at the foundation that when someone becomes our client, the first thing that we want to know is, do they have an advanced healthcare directive and do they have a POLST? Now, I know coming into the care homes, that's a big deal. But sometimes it slips by because we'll get calls from a care home that says the POLST is blank. It's not signed. The doctor didn't ever sign it. Or there's no advanced healthcare directive. There's the POLST, but it doesn't say beyond that. POLST and advanced healthcare directives are two different documents. The POLST is good in an emergency, but it's not what guides the hospital when an admission happens. So think about those things. What gives you the right to decide for someone? Who else is involved? And what kind of documentation do you have? Are there any written instructions? Written instructions come in a number of different forms. You're familiar with the POLST. I'm sure all of you are, with the Advanced Healthcare Directive. We also like to see videotaped interviews with our clients, where we sit them down with witnesses and we go through the Advanced Healthcare Directive questions and we have a conversation about them. If this happens, Mrs. Smith, what would you want us to do? Would you want us to call the ambulance? Would you want us to leave you alone and see what happens? Would you want us to take do everything we could to keep you alive if you had a heart attack or you stopped breathing? What is it you would want to do? And try to engage that person in a conversation. If they have capacity, it's a great thing to do because you have those documents in video form to come back and work with. And then there's something called a quality of life statement that is becoming more and more important throughout the United States. And this is a statement, you might think of this for yourself too. It's a statement that says what an individual would not want to live with. So recently my dad was admitted to hospice, my mother also a little earlier, but with both of them, I began asking them the question, what is it that would make life unbearable for you? Would it be not being able to walk? Would it be not being able to take care of your own toileting? Would it be not being able to dress yourself? Not being able to see? Maybe not being able to eat decent food and have to depend on Ensure or perhaps tube feeding? Ask these questions and let the individual tell you what point they would say, enough is enough already. I don't want to live like that. That's called a quality of life statement. It really can be helpful in determining how far to take medical intervention or medical support in someone that has lost capacity. So think of those things. Go back and check your POLSTs. Make sure every one of them is complete. Make sure the questions don't conflict. Look at the Advanced Healthcare Directive. Is it clear? Advanced Healthcare Directive should have somebody designated as a surrogate in that document. If there isn't, maybe you want to go back and look at that again. Talk to your clients, talk to your family members and involved parties, and try to get that as complete as you can now before you need it. And if you have the opportunity, turn on the video and talk to folks. Find out what it is they like, don't like, and don't hesitate to say, if something happened and you weren't able to do, and then you describe something, would that be okay with you? Now, my daughters turned it around on me the other day. He said, Dad, you're 70 years old. If something happens to you, what is it you don't want to live with? I had to really stop and think, what is it that would make it so that I would say, just let me go? I decided that for me, it'd be the inability to communicate with others and the inability to perform at least 3 of my own activities of daily life. Now, I work with this just like you do all the time, so I'm very familiar with all those terms and with what they mean and the implications. Most people aren't, so be prepared to do some explaining as you work on those areas. Sometimes there's nobody but you, and a decision has to be made. There's no family member, there's no attorney sitting off in the wings, there's no group of doctors willing to make a decision. There's just you. And somebody has to do something. If you're in that point, and this is especially appropriate for family members, because otherwise there's some legal things that would prevent you from making decisions. But if it's a family member and you're the only one left to make a decision, how do you do that? How are you going to decide? Have you ever had a conversation with your parents or with your loved ones, maybe your spouse, and really gone into this? What if something happens and you're left needing to make a decision for your loved one? How are you going to do that? There are several different approaches to making decisions for others. The first one is what they call a supported decision. And that's where you're able to still talk with somebody. They're still able to comprehend at least some of what you're saying, and you're able to use suggestions, drawings, sketches, whatever, and then coming to a conclusion based on what you think they're telling you and your knowledge supporting the logic in what they're telling you. We had a client admitted to ER a few years ago in pretty bad shape. She had serious infection on both legs. I don't know if it had got to MRSA yet, but the ER folks told me that they were going to have to amputate or she was going to die. They needed to take both legs off. She was not able to say anything for herself. And this is a very, very smart lady. But she was completely out of it, not able to make a decision. I was her guardian. I am her guardian. She's still living. And they turned to me. Gary, you've got to make a decision. Well, I had never gone over the situation of, you might have to have your legs cut off. What do you want me to tell them if that ever happens? I didn't have that conversation with her. Most people wouldn't in advance. But the surgeon kept telling me that if we don't do this, she will die. So I had to make a decision for her. And I'll show you a little bit later how that decision came down. If she had still been alive, if she had still been awake and conscious, I could have engaged her in supported decision-making. I could have then asked her and explained the situation and said, now, what is it you think? And even though she might have been delirious with fever, I would have had a chance to at least work with her on trying to understand what her decisions would have been and then help make those decisions with her. Substituted judgment is where I found myself with this lady. I couldn't communicate with her, so I had to look at it and think, now, what decision would she make if she could, and if she could tell me what she wanted? What would her decision be? And then I take my knowledge and what I think I know she would want and make a judgment based on those 2 factors. So I know the person. I'm able to understand some of the background. I can check my files. I can look at the records. I can understand her history and her background, and then come to a conclusion of making a decision that I think she would have made had she been able to. Now, that's not always something you can do either. And there are standards that are called best interest. And this is where I don't have any history to go back on. There are no family members. There are no involved parties. There's no one for me to turn to. There are no records for me to turn to, but I'm legally responsible to make a decision, and I've got to figure out what's in the best interest of this person. That's where I found myself with this lady, unable to understand what she really would have wanted. This woman read the New York Times every morning. She knew about current affairs far more than I did. But she had a serious mental illness, so she had difficulty managing her life and had ended up homeless and with her legs terribly, terribly infected, to the point where, as I told you, the surgeon said she's going to die. I felt it was in her best interest not to let her die. So I authorized amputation. They admitted her to the hospital and began preparations. They said, we'll do the surgery tomorrow. We'll bring the documents upstairs for you to sign and take care of everything. I didn't feel great about it. Taking somebody's legs off is guaranteeing they're never going to walk again. So that's a pretty tough thing. So the next morning, I was up there visiting with her, trying to visit with her, and she opened her eyes. She has tubes down her throat. She's hooked up to all these different machines, but she was conscious again. I went backwards. I went back to substituted judgment. And I began showing her by pictures what was going to happen. She looked at me. She sort of shook her head a little bit. And I said, what would happen if you were able to write here? She surprised me. She picked up her hand, grabbed the pen out of my hand, and on this scrap of paper we were looking at, she wrote, "No cut, die soon." That was pretty clear to me what she wanted at that point. She did not want me to have her legs amputated. She would rather die. Her quality of life statement would have been, if I can't walk anymore, I don't want to be here. Well, the surgeons came up ready to take her to surgery, and I rescinded my authority. Guess how that went? I had 3 very angry surgeons questioning what I was doing, saying I was not making the right choice. I was condemning her to death. They were going to report me. I said, well, go right ahead. Call your ethics committee. Do whatever you have to do. But this is what she is wanting, and she has the capacity to communicate that to me, and I have it here, and your nurse witnessed it. So I'm sticking by that. Well, they sent her home to die. I'm glad to say she did not die. She still has both her legs. She can't walk well. But she's still here, and she's still reading the New York Times and cussing me out every time she can. But we were able to communicate and make a decision. Sometimes that's not going to be able to happen. And you're going to have to depend on your decision-making ability to make a decision. When that position comes, you've got to think, what's going to influence my decision? Is it going to be what I believe? Do I have strong religious beliefs that are going to influence me? Is there going to be professional pressure like I was receiving from those surgeons? Is it going to cost too much? All of these are very important areas to think about, but they are also areas that need to be set aside when you're making a decision in the best interest of your client, of your patient, especially the personal beliefs area. We find that this is really difficult for many people who have strong feelings about end-of-life care and different religious factors, blood transfusions, and things like that. You have to set that stuff aside when you're working with someone who may not share those same values or those same beliefs. So keep in mind, what are your personal beliefs, and don't let them overwhelm your ability to make a decision for the person for whom you're providing care. Professional pressure is tough. I get it from doctors. I get it from emergency drivers, EMT people. I get it from lawyers. I get it from their even CPAs when you talk about finances. Everybody seems to have an opinion about what's best for this person. If that person is in your care, you're in the best position to make a decision in the absence of anybody else having that authority. So keep those three areas in mind when you're forced to look at a decision and come up with an answer for the people who are saying, what are you going to do? Now, thankfully, you're not just left out there in the cold. It's not just you. There are a lot of resources to help you make decisions. Here at the Caregiver Foundation, we have a 52-question form that we use when we are faced with having to make a critical decision in somebody's life or healthcare. It asks a lot of questions, and it goes through this line of questions down to where you come up with a conclusion at the end that is about as close as anybody could get to making a good decision. May not be the perfect decision, but it gives us a way to make a logical decision that we have no problem presenting to a judge if that happens. If somebody gets upset enough to take us to court, we're able to show the judge, here's how we made the decision. Here's the evidence that we didn't have healthcare decision, advanced healthcare directive. We didn't have a pulse. We didn't have a family member, whatever it was. And this is how we came to that conclusion. So there are a lot of different resources that you can turn to. Religious leaders can be very helpful in making a decision. If you know that the individual is a very strong Catholic, you can involve the priest, maybe a priest that knew that person when they were active in their parish, and talk to them about that. Every hospital has an ethics person or committee. You can turn to them and get them to help you make a decision. You can ask professional guardians. There aren't that many here in Hawaii, but there are a few. You can look at a book that I recommend highly by Vicki Kind. It's called The Caregiver's Path, and it looks at decision-making that caregivers have to face. It's a real good resource. Hospice chaplains are really a terrific resource because they are used to helping people from many different backgrounds with all sorts of different faiths and beliefs and helping them in the end of life time period. And they can help you understand what that person might be thinking if they're not able to communicate with you. And of course, there's always friends and family if they're available. If you know this person had a really close relationship with their Rotary Club or with their parish committee of some sort, and you know they were close with people, you can't tell them everything because HIPAA will restrict you from being able to share very much. But you can say things like, you know, if you were faced, put it on them. If you were faced with this kind of a situation, what kind of choice would you make? Find out what they would. Chances are they might have the same outlook that the person that you're providing care for would have. Family members can be a great resource, and they can also be a very bad resource. So keep in mind that family members often have their own agendas, their own strong beliefs. We had a case a few years ago. We were called in to the bedside of a person at Queens, and there were three people there, three kids. One was a Southern Baptist, one was a very strong, active Catholic, and one was a Seventh-day Adventist? No. What's the other one? Jehovah's Witness. Very different points of view. They were all arguing over whether or not it was okay to take the IVs out of mom, who was showing no brain function whatsoever. And they were fighting about it. The Baptist said, you can't do that. God will take her if that's what he wants. The Catholic person said, you shouldn't have put the tubes in to begin with. If you have to take them off, that's not right, because that would be like killing them, and killing is wrong. Seventh-day Adventist said, you've been giving her blood. I'm not Seventh-day Adventist. Jehovah's Witness said, you've been giving her blood, and that's terrible. You've just condemned her to hell. Well, I thought, my gosh, how am I going to deal with this trio of unhappy people? We talked among ourselves for a while, and finally I asked them, I said, look, none of you seem to be able to be willing to make a decision, and a decision needs to be made here. Would you give me permission to be the one to make the decision? None of you have to make a decision. It'll be me. It won't go against any of your beliefs because you won't have made that decision. I will. They thought about it for a while and they finally said, okay, I guess that would be okay. So they all left the room. I turned to the doctor and said, do what you know you need to do. We turned the machines off, withdrew the IV needles, and within 30 minutes she had passed. But it gave those family members an out because I was willing to make a decision that they weren't able to bring themselves to make. Now, a lot of times family members won't make a decision because of some guilt they're hanging on to, and that's very hard to deal with. Or sometimes they'll make a decision because there's money involved. And if somebody dies, that means the money is going to become available sooner. Doesn't sound nice, but it happens. So don't hesitate to reach out to other people and find people that can help you make decisions when those decisions need to be made. When you make a decision, you're also going to have to live with that decision. I've had to say goodbye to, I can't even tell you how many people now, where I've made the decision to usually turn off the machines and let the individual pass away. I have to live with that. Maybe if I hadn't said to go ahead and turn off the machine, maybe they would have woken up. Maybe they would have come out of that coma and been fine. I don't know. So think about the fact that whatever decision you make, you have to find a place in yourself where you're going to be okay with that decision. And that's also where chaplains, religious people, things like that can help you live with that decision and understand your own feelings about it. Now, what about yourself? If something happens to you tonight, do you have your affairs in order so that your loved ones don't have to be faced with wondering what it is you want? Do you have a quality of life statement? Spend time making your loved ones know what you want. Take the time. Don't put it off. Make sure you have an advanced healthcare directive. Make sure your post is complete and signed. So get those things in order so that your family isn't faced with making a decision and then worrying that they might have made the wrong decision. Here's some of the questions that you want to think about in your quality of life statement. What conditions would make me not want to live? What would you be willing to live with? What's a good death? That's a funny question, but what's a good death to you? What do you want to say to the person who's making these decisions? I hope that you would want to say, it's okay. You're doing your best. But think about those things. Now, I'm happy to talk about all sorts of things, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk and to share ideas and ask me questions or anyone else. So I will unshare this screen. So John, you can take it back.
Does anybody have experiences they want to share or questions they want to ask Gary while we have him on?
I have a family actually, and it's happening right now, that the resident can't remember where she put all of her documents, her trust documents. She says she swears that she did it like 40 years ago and she prepared it. Her husband has passed away already. And now the kids don't know where it is. They went through like safety deposit boxes. They've gone in the house and they still cannot find it. So they don't know what to do at this time. It was easy because they were able to do the post because she still is able to say, okay, you know, I'm going to let my son, you know, have power of attorney, but she doesn't know where any of the papers are.
Well, if she's able to have capacity still, she can draw up new ones. That would be the simplest thing to do.
To draw up all the new papers? Okay, I'll
Oh,
tell
yeah.
them that.
New power of attorney. If she doesn't know where the trust is, they can do what's called an amendment to the trust, where they just simply write a whole new trust. And the first part of it says it replaces any previous trust.
Oh,
And they
okay.
just make it all over again. And do it while she's got capacity to do it. That's really important. So,
Okay, I'll let them know that.
yeah. If it's a situation where somebody is not able to have enough capacity to make those decisions, you might need to go to court and get conservatorship guardianship, which is expensive and time consuming. But if the family's going to likely have a fight about it, then somebody probably should go ahead and go to court and get that legal authority.
You know, because she's my resident, she kind of confided in me and she told me she really doesn't trust her kids, but I'm not saying anything. I'm just trying to stay out of it. But she says, I don't know, you know, I don't want, you know, at one point, one person to have it. Then the next week she says, I don't want him to have it either. And I'm like, I'm staying out of this.
I think you're being smart there.
Because I know both of the kids, you know, both of the kids come to visit. So I don't know how to help her. I mean,
Does she have any idea who she used as an attorney 40 years ago?
You know, she does know who the attorney was, and the attorney died.
You might find out who took over his clients.
Oh,
they might be able to represent. So you could contact the Bar Association, the Hawaii State Bar Association, and see if they could help you figure that out. But yeah, it can get really dicey when people want to change. We had a client who refused to name any beneficiaries, just flat out refused. She kept saying, no, you guys are the ones taking care of me. Just take it all when I'm dead. And I kept saying, you know, I can't do that. You know, even
so what do you do? Yeah, so what do you do in that case?
Well, I brought in an attorney and talked with her. And then we finally made decisions for her based on what her daughter, who had passed away, was involved with, what she cared about. And this lady liked animals. And I forget what the third one was, but there were three nonprofits, the Humane Society, the State Library, and something. And we just chose those based on the interest that we knew she had at some point, and figured that's the best we can do. She had no family left, so.
Oh, nice.
So that one worked out okay, but it can get real dicey otherwise.
Hey, Gary, we have a question in the chat. What about their investments or stocks their loved one made and children can't find it and the resident is incapacitated? What should they do? Any attorneys or resources that they can use?
Yes. An attorney would be an important thing on this area, because somebody has to have the legal position to ask the investment companies and the banks for information. So it sounds like in those situations, we often will go to court and ask for conservatorship so that we have the ability to manage whatever assets they do or don't have. And then we can go to the insurance commission. Insurance companies have a collective board that they use where they'll put policies in, basic policy information. And so you can give a social security number and ask them to please find out if there are any policies out there. And that can often help. You can contact unclaimed properties in any state that the person's lived in and find out if the state is holding any assets. And you should do it for yourself sometime. You'll be surprised. There's probably $3.82 out there somewhere with your name on it from something that you don't even remember. But sometimes there's $1.5 million sitting out there somewhere. So these are steps that we do all the time, every day here at the foundation, researching those things. But an attorney is a really good person to guide you through that. It would probably be good to use a probate attorney, someone who's very familiar with handling estates after a person has passed, because that's when all the legal positions change. Up until then, it's still that person's, it's their asset and their right to do whatever with it if they haven't been declared incapacitated. If they have, then they definitely need a guardian and conservator to manage those assets. It is possible to consolidate everything when you're doing that and bring it all back to Hawaii. That's entirely possible. You'll find investment companies are not helpful. Insurance companies are not helpful. You have to make sure the paperwork is done correctly or they won't help you. So it's very frustrating. I'm seeing here, where can you go to sign papers if a patient has no decision maker, no family? There is no particular place. You need an attorney to help you file legal documents to get appointed as either guardian or conservator for that individual before you can make any legal decisions for that person. If the person is partially incapacitated, now you can get someone like a geriatric psychiatrist or a mental health specialist to help decide what level of capacity they have. Sometimes it's possible to get an individual to appoint an agent or appoint a power of attorney, even though they can't make the decisions for each investment account or bank account or things like that. But yet they do have the ability to say, I want somebody to make these decisions for me, and I want it to be you. And then you can get that done legally. Now, if there are family members, expect it to be contested. For those of you running care homes, you have to be very careful with the financial side of things to avoid having conflicts of interest. Really, really important that you don't go down that very muddy path. We have a situation right now with an individual who has capacity and he wants to leave a good chunk of his estate to his caregiver. Well, guess who showed up at the door? APS. Somebody reported it. APS goes, I understand that's what he's saying he wants to do, and he does have the right to do it. But you need to understand that in our books, that puts you on the hot button on our books. And we will be looking at you extra, extra carefully with every client you take in. And now the caregiver is all freaked out because she doesn't want that kind of attention. She's not doing anything wrong. So we're trying to come up with a solution for that situation, but just be aware of it. It's easy, so easy to get both official and unofficial negative outlooks against you especially when it's dealing with any belongings or money. So be careful on that side. Legal aid will come in and help on a lot of things. They will not help on guardianship, and they will not help on conservatorship, and they don't deal with trusts. So when it comes to healthcare decision making, they can help you kind of go through the documents and try to come up with something on that. They're very good at helping with mediation. And if you have a family situation where they're really fighting with each other and you're having a hard time with everybody, try and get them involved with the Kupunopono program at the Mediation Center of the Pacific. It's a great program. Professional mediators there that can help families come up with solutions to their problems and make it a little bit easier. Also, the University of Hawaii's legal elder law program has a lot of help too. They've got great people in there. They'll often give you a young law student to go through things with you and help you figure out the documents and help you figure out what direction to go. So don't hesitate to call them. Dr. Peach and Dr. Lenora Lee down there are really terrific people. Anybody have any other situation that I might be able to give some idea on?
Hi, Gary. I was wondering if you ever ran into an issue where the pulse and the advance directive didn't match up, and
yes.
what would you do in that situation if you did one maybe 10 years ago and then changed your mind?
Mhm. That can be very dangerous because the emergency people are going to react to the pulse, not the advanced healthcare directive. So it's important to understand those are two different things. Pulse says what to do if you're responding to an emergency and I'm going to die if you don't do something. Here's what I want, or here's what I don't want. But an advanced healthcare directive can go into a lot more detail, give a lot more specifics, a lot more qualification. But when they're completely opposite, and that does happen, that's a hard thing. You're going to have to go back and think which document, well, first of all, which one is the newest? That would override whatever else the other one was. But often they're on the same day, they're filled out at the same time. You're going to have to base it on what you know of that person. So this is why I really recommend having conversations as often as you can with the person and documenting them. You don't want it just to be, oh, I sat on her bedside and she told me this. You know, if you're going to get into that discussion, have somebody else in the room. So, and then write a summary about it and have it signed by the other person as a witness. So you have documentation to go back to. Saves a lot of unpleasantness down the road. We did have a case, and I'll tell you, it was me, because I hadn't updated my pulse or my advanced health care directive when COVID came around. I had always put down DNR, you know, if I'm going to be on tubes and stuff, don't keep me alive and all that. And then COVID came along and I realized, wait a minute, I might not just need to be resuscitated and taken care of for a little while and then be okay. And I thought, man, I got to change this stuff, because if they're going to go by what I have written right now, that's not what I want. So even for yourself, you need to look at it. And if it's just been the normal, oh, it's easy to do DNR on everything and don't worry about it, think more carefully. But hopefully you don't have that situation too often to have to try and figure out which one to follow.
Thanks, Gary. We have one more question in the chat. Crystal put that their client had a stroke and the husband lives on the Big Island, signed the health advance care directive under the POA with the help of the social worker. The designated agent is the husband, and they made Crystal the first alternate agent. Is this legal to do?
Yes, but if you don't want to be the second in line, you can always decline it. So just because somebody names you as their agent doesn't obligate you to that position. If it's something you just aren't comfortable with, you don't want to be in that position, you can say, no, I'm declining that position. And then somebody else has to come up with a solution for that. But it is legal. Somebody can change it and have a social worker and a witness sign it. And if it's the current document and the person did have capacity, then it's perfectly legal. Even if you don't like it. I argued with probate judge Browning a couple of years ago. Made the mistake of doing it in court and got scolded, but we were having a difficulty with this guy that was making really stupid decisions. And I was trying to stop those decisions from harming him. And the judge stopped me and he said, wait a minute, you just told me he has enough capacity to say what he wants, but not understand all the way. He says, Gary, you got to remember, people have the right to make a decision, even if it's stupid. They still have the right to make those decisions. So we don't have to agree with what they're deciding. We do have to agree, number one, do they have the capacity? And if they don't, then we need to document that. We need medical people backing that up. But if they do have that capacity, doesn't matter what we think, we need to be carrying out what they say. And believe me, I want to change a lot of people's papers if I could. Because some of them they just don't think about what they're doing. They just fill the paper out and that's it. They don't really get into it. Okua Mau is a great organization. If you're not familiar with them, please become a member and support them. They're fabulous. And they have great programs in helping people understand how to fill out these forms effectively and with a lot of understanding. So take advantage of them. They really can help.
Thanks, Lindsay. Lindsay put the link for Kokuamau in the chat. Gary, do you know of any programs that can help pay to get guardianship for a client that has no money to maybe help with attorney fees?
It's very difficult because it's an expensive process. It runs somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 or $7,000 if it's not contested. If it's contested, it can go just through the roof. But for someone with no money, first thing I would do is see if there are any family members that would help finance the legal affairs, the legal costs. If that's not available, talk to the Hawaii State Bar Association. Many of the attorneys do pro bono work, but you got to ask them. And they'll put the word out there that there's this situation, somebody needs help. Are there any attorneys out there that can help? I would also talk to the elder law program at the university to see if one of the young students would be willing to help, not serve as an attorney, but help you with what's called a pro se application. And that's where you're not having an attorney represent you in court. But you do need somebody who really understands all the law to help you fill those papers out correctly. And then go to the court and try and have the judge listen to you directly, making a petition for guardianship. Not easy, though. It's really not easy. We have every week at least 3 calls from hospitals or rehab facilities asking us to become guardian for somebody who doesn't have anybody, and they have no idea, does this person have any assets or not? All they know is they're not getting paid and the person's in a bed and doesn't need to be in that critical bed. They need to be in a care home or a facility or somewhere else, but not in that hospital. It's hard. We can't just do that because we have, the foundation isn't funded by millions and millions of dollars. So we can't just go out and absorb that kind of cost. Once in a while, we'll work with the hospital to have them guarantee to cover the cost. And then we'll go in and say, we'll go in as a temporary guardian to help get them out of the facility and placed in a care home. And that also gives us the ability to go in and try to find out, do they have any assets? Are they completely indigent? And get that information. A lot of times they don't have anything, but then rehab or whatever facility we're working with, if they'll cover the cost of it, it saves them money in the long run. If the person's otherwise healthy and not likely to leave their hospital for a few years, it's far cheaper for them to go ahead and pay the legal costs and the administrative costs of getting this done and moving somebody out and getting other people back into that bed. So, but not easy, not an easy thing. I don't know of any charity that will do it directly, fund it directly.
Good to know. Thank you so much, Gary,
Yeah.
for that information.
Wish I had a better answer.
I wish you did too.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions or want to share anything else while we have Gary on? Thank you so much, Gary, by the way. That was a really good presentation.
Well, I'm really honored you'd let me come and share a little bit. And if you have any questions or want to find out anything, feel free to give me a call, send me an email, and I will respond. And if you don't need me, I'm going to say goodbye and happy holidays to everyone.
Wait, I had a fast question.
Yes,
You know,
ma'am.
you said the quality of life, you had a list of questions,
Yes.
quality of life statement, so that you get to know what a person wants.
Right.
Is it possible for you to share those questions with us so that we can have conversations with our residents and see what they want in life?
Sure. Let me make a note. I'll send that over. Make a note here. Yeah, I'll send that series of questions. The quality of life statement, usually we end up with about 6 questions. So it's a little easier than our 52 question questionnaire. That one goes into a lot more. It's not so much quality of life, it's choice of life on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
well, yeah, go ahead.
The basic question is, what would it take for you not to want to live? Find a way to ask that kind of question. What is it you just couldn't live with? Because then you kind of get a good idea of how far a person is willing to be uncomfortable or unhappy or, just not having a good life in any way. And for some people, my grandmother, keep me here to the end. When I'm gone, I'm gone. But until that point, I'm here. And she was present right up to the moment of her death. She couldn't do anything. We had to do everything. But that's what she wanted. Whereas my dad, on the other hand, said, get me a leaky boat and set me out to sea. No, I'm not going to do it. But that was his response, completely different. So don't be afraid to ask. You'd be surprised. People will actually tell you.
Very informative. Thank you so much, Gary.
You're welcome. Aloha, everyone, and happy holidays. Take care.
Mele kalikimaka.
Mele kalikimaka. Aloha.
So for those of you that are still on, we would like you to go ahead and address the questions that are on this evaluation about mentation, dementia, and depression. So again, we ask you how many of your residents have been screened for dementia or memory problems in the last year? How many of your residents have been screened for depression in the last year? And how many of your residents had an emergency room visit or were hospitalized because of agitation, delirium in the last year? So to go ahead and get your certificates, you'll need to go ahead and answer the questions and complete the certificate of attendance form, the evaluation form. Thank you very much. Is there someone else that wants to go ahead and say something? Well, you know what? I wish everyone happy holidays. Have a Merry Christmas. Have a Happy New Year. Be safe and healthy 2025. And aloha. Mahalo.
Recording in progress.